Hi there, it's Natasha and thank you so much for joining me today. Today I'm going to be having a lot of fun doing a technique with acrylic blocks. Now I'm going to use some acrylic blocks, but I'm also going to show you some alternatives as well. I just wanted to quickly start off by saying I am using the Holtz watercolor paper. You can see here that one side has a bit of tooth to it and the other side is completely smooth, and I always use the completely smooth side. I very rarely, if ever, use the textured side. However, I do find this to be the best watercolor paper that I have found. Now, I like to use acrylic blocks with straight edges as opposed to these ones here, which have these kind of finger grips, the curly wavy edges. These ones I just don't find make kind of the right impression I want. However, if that's what you have, then give it a go because you might like the outcome. I have these 3 blocks here and I'm going to show you a few different ways to do this today, and then I'm going to show you some alternatives to using acrylic blocks as well. Now these are the Simon Hurley dye-based inks. These are water reactive. I'm going to be using the Oxide inks today purely because that's what I have the biggest range in colors. The first technique here is where I'm going to use this larger acrylic block. I'm using some ripe persimmon, and I think that's either mustard seed or wild honey, and then this is the salty ocean, just popping a little bit on each corner there, adding a couple of light spritzes of water, and then popping this down in the middle of my watercolor piece of paper. I'm going to give it a light bit of pressure on top, and then I'm actually going to leave this here until it dries, just because I want to kind of show you the difference between a few of these techniques. Now next up, I'm going to be using this smaller acrylic block. Now I was just going to start off by using these 2 colors and just having kind of 1 color per block, but I actually changed my mind and I'm going to kind of do a little trick with 2 of them. So for each color, for the blues for example, I'm using Tumbled Glass and Salty Ocean. I'm doing a kind of diagonal stripe down the middle with the lighter color, and then I'm adding the darker color to the outsides here. Now you do not have to do this. You can just use 1 color on your acrylic block. Having a play around with this technique is super fun, and that's exactly what I was doing today. So I added a couple of light splashes of water, squirts of water from my water sprayer, and then I put some gentle pressure. I don't want to push too hard because sometimes it can kind of squish out the sides a little bit, but I don't leave this to dry. I do leave it on there while I get the next colors ready, and that's for about 20 seconds or so, and I feel like that just gives them the ink a minute to kind of sink into the paper, and then I will move around the ink here. I don't want a completely even beautiful square for this one. Now the next couple of colors, I have a Squeezed Lemonade and some Mustard Seed, again just a lighter yellow and a slightly darker yellow, and I'm going to do the same thing, give it a light spritz with water, and then pop this one down too. Now I was kind of going with a little uneven kind of block, watercolory kind of look. I don't really know what to call it, but I was having a whole lot of fun. This technique is really fun, and the results are pretty unpredictable if I'm honest. Here for the kind of pinks, pinky orangey, pinky reds, I'm going to be using some spun sugar and some ripe persimmon, and I don't know why I was going with this color, as I just kind of, it was that nice orangey vibe that I was really enjoying. It was a little bit brighter, and so I'm just going to use these 3 colors and repeat these all over my piece of watercolor paper, and this is going to create my pattern for the background. So, I mean, depending on what size your acrylic blocks are, depending what you have in your stash, you are able to kind of give this a go and create a really fun background. Now, this one was probably my favorite of them all, but they all came out really different, and that is the kind of fun thing, is that if you have larger acrylic blocks, you could even just angle them so that they only kind of did the corners of your piece of paper, and that would leave the center for a gorgeous big sentiment or a centerpiece or a focal piece. I mean, even if you just have the larger blocks, you can still do different things other than just kind of popping them down in the middle, even though in the middle looks really gorgeous too. So you can have a whole lot of fun with this technique. If you don't have water-based dye inks, water reactive inks, then you could try something like gelatos, scribble sticks. You could try some watercolor inks, watercolor paints on the back of these. Lots and lots of different options. It doesn't mean that you are just limited to using ink pads at all. Lots of fun kind of play and creative time to be had. I had a ball doing this technique. Like, I think I spent a whole afternoon and I made a whole lot of these, but I kind of just wanted to show you the 3 different main techniques that I was using, and then if you didn't have acrylic blocks at all, then I have a couple of alternatives that you are able to try. So here I am just finishing up, and again, this is not need to be neat or perfect or perfectly centered or lined up. It is just really free, and that is kind of a really nice thing. If I felt like I needed to adjust something, I did it with the paintbrush, but I was trying to pretty much leave it be and just really enjoy that it was a little bit kind of not perfect, I guess. So I was just trying to go with it, and this one, as I said, ended up being my absolute favorite. So this is wet at the moment. And often these inks, or any products really that you're using, will dry back a little bit when they're all nice and dry. So I'll show you that too. I nearly dropped it there. I could have ended up in a pickle, but thankfully I didn't drop it too bad at all. Now here is this acrylic block. This has been sitting for a couple of hours, not on purpose, but that's just how long I was away. And I lifted it up, and you can see that is a really bold, vivid color there. And the watercolor kind of hasn't shifted around. It has really stayed in place. I couldn't handle the little gap up there in the corner though, so I did take some blue and just get a little paintbrush to fix it up. Now, if you don't have acrylic blocks, I had a look through my embossing powder stash, and this is the glaze here. All you want is something with a flat top to it, so not kind of a dome or anything, or it doesn't want to go concave inwards sort of thing, or you want to make sure it is nice and flat. And I'm going to be using the ripe persimmon and seedless preserve, so kind of an orangey and a purpley kind of color. I'm going to give it a little dunk into the ink, and then same thing. I'm going to use some spray and just pop it down, give it a little bit of pressure, and then pop it up, and I get these gorgeous little circles. I did clean that in between there. I've just been editing this video so it's nice and short, so I definitely gave them a little wipe on a damp cloth to make sure that I didn't transfer any color in between. And you could use as many colors as you want to use here, but I just chose to stick with two to create a really nice background. But anything basically that is non-porous is going to create these gorgeous shapes. So have a look around your craft room. It might be the bottom of a glue bottle. It might be the top of some spray bottles that you have. It might be, I don't know, have a look around and see what you have to kind of create this. These were sitting here in front of me, and they actually ended up working perfectly well to create all of these gorgeous round dots. Now you can see that there is one there in the middle, that purple one, that kind of missed a little bit. And all I'm going to do is just Reinker and go back over that at the end, just because I couldn't handle leaving that little white space there. I probably should. I need to learn to kind of let go a little bit more and love these imperfections, but I felt like I was already doing that with this kind of loose watercolor look. So I couldn't resist. You'll see me in just a second add a little bit more purple and go over top of that last one. But again, this was really, really simple, not using any specific tools, using the inks that we already have and some container lids or anything that you might have in your house or your stash, and it's a gorgeous background created, ready to go. Now for the focal point, I have this Birds of the Woods stamp set. Now this is a gorgeous stamp set that is a layering stamp set, and I don't often purchase these, but I have been looking for some really nice bird focal points, and there's not a whole lot of them on the market. I was looking for kind of a larger or a bigger sized bird, because I did want it to be focal points. And although there is like a complete layering guide in there, Altenew do a fantastic, like big, lots and lots of instructions, really clear. There's an A1, A2, A3, that is the first layer, and then B1, B2, and then that's kind of all there is to it. Now, I am not a big fan of kind of getting out my stamping platforms and really making it all precise and perfect, and that takes a lot of time in my opinion. And honestly, I mostly like to just kind of keep going with the flow and not kind of work really hard at layering stamps, I guess. So I'm stamping the outline here a couple of times in the VersaFine Onyx Black ink. I'm going to be creating two birds, just using one for this project, but the lightest color ink here, this happens to be the Frosty Pink color from Altenew, and I'm going to pop this down as my first layer. Now, when I am filming, I actually have all these cameras and lights and things up above my head, so in order for you guys to see what I'm doing, I can't get my head up above the paper that I am working on. So this is kind of, take this with a grain of salt. This is how not tricky it is to line these up. I did not do a perfect job, don't get me wrong, but these are very, very easy to layer up, and they're kind of loose to layer up, and that's what I like most about this. So I'm just using the middle color, which is the coral berry, and then I used ruby red for the darker color here, which is the third color. Now, some of the layers actually do the feet of the bird, and I chose to just wipe the color off of those because I'm going to be cutting these out, and I'm not fussy cutting out the feet of the bird, so I chopped those off, and we'll fix that later on. For the darker colors here, I love that I can kind of put reds and blues together. These birds, I have seen people do all sorts of colors with these, so I felt really comfortable doing kind of reds and blues. But this is the Caribbean sky and the Parisian blue, which is the darker one, and I just had a whole lot of fun. This was really, really easy, and I didn't have to kind of be really specific. It's very, very obvious. For the beak there, I just used this a tiny wee triangle for the beak that comes in the stamp set, and I'm using Guppy. This is the Simon Hurley dye ink, mixing them up so that I have everything I need for my little birds to be complete. Then I'm going to stamp a couple of these branches, and I'm just stamping this out in some black ink. I am just stamping out 2 birds and 2 branches, as I said, but I'm going to be using one of each in this project. I'm taking some vintage photo ink, and even though this is not watercolor paper, so I do need to be aware of that, I am using a water brush, and I just squeeze a little bit onto the lid of my ink pad, and then there's no shading, nothing fancy. I am just going to colour in these branches, and then I will be fussy cutting these ones out as well. So I'm not worrying about the leaves because I do not have the patience to kind of fussy cut around all of those gorgeous little leaves. So I am just going to cut off the leaves, and that will be the gorgeous branch left. Now there are lots and lots of different things that you could pop on top of these backgrounds. In fact, the backgrounds, what you could use as focal points is almost endless. You could just use a shape, a heart, a nice big word sentiment or word dies or stamps, and black silhouette stamping over top. The ideas are absolutely endless. I just had this little bird and I've been dying to use him, so I'm going to pop him on top, and I really like it. It's a very colourful card, and there is not a lot of black in here at all, which is uncommon for me, so I really enjoyed putting these together. Now here they are all nice and dry. They are pretty vibrant still. I love the watercolor look to this one. I love that it's not perfect. I love that it still kind of looks like the squares, but it's definitely very loose. Here's the nice vibrant gorgeous one that we let dry with the acrylic block on top. And then here is the other one that I did, and I love this background too. There are so many cool things that I think I would love to do with that one as well. Now, because these cards are really bright and cheerful, which is what I was aiming for, my one trick that I always have, especially when I'm putting something colourful on top as well, is to use a little bit of vellum. I definitely don't want to lose the colour, but I do want to just distract a little bit and make sure that that focal point is indeed a focal point, and that our background is gorgeous, but it is a background. So I did cut an oval out of some of this lawn fawn vellum. And then I have my bird and my branch here, which I fussy cut out, which was really easy. This bird is a nice clear shape. That was another thing I was looking at when I go to purchase stamps. I always look at my ability to be able to fussy cut them, and this bird is really, really easy. I'm adding some double-sided tape to the back of the branch just because it adheres nicely to vellum, and this is a really kind of dainty small little branch. You could use any die here, any stamp, you could use anything at all. You didn't even have to add a branch. You could just use a little strip of paper down the bottom of that oval and that would work fine. Here is the stamped outline that has the feet in it, and I told you earlier that I was going to cut off the feet, which I did indeed. I'm taking some of the VersaFine Onyx black ink, which is what I stamped the birds in, and I am just going to stamp those little feet sitting on the branch. And then just to join up the branch and our birdie, I'm using a little black fine liner pen just to kind of add the little stalks to his little legs, and that is much easier than me fussy cutting out his gorgeous little feet. Now there are some really, really nice sentiments in this set, very, very nice, and again that's something else that I'm going to look at. I decided to use this yellow square over here as kind of a little placeholder for my sentiment. So this says thank you with the larger font, and then smaller down the bottom it says for all you do, and that's just a really, really nice card. I have someone in mind who I am sending this to, so there is my little piece of vellum with my branch, and now I'm going to attach my bird to the vellum. I'm going to do that using some liquid glue, but you could just use some double-sided tape as well. Then if the vellum is hard up against all of those colors, it kind of becomes a little bit more see-through, but if you add it up on some foam dots and it's off the background a little bit, then it is going to be a little bit more opaque than it otherwise would be if it were flat down. So that's why I put some foam squares down on the back side of the bird, and this is going to be right there up in that kind of corner. And then just to finish this off, this one started off to be 4 by 5 1/4 inches, so I'm going to pop this onto a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch card base, and that is me all finished for today. I love this bright, cheerful, gorgeous card that we have created, And I hope that you've enjoyed this video. Everything that I've used today that I can find will be linked in the description box below if you want to go and check out any of that. Otherwise, I will see you in the next video. Thanks, bye.